I never thought my pride flag would trigger a federal investigation, but there I was, staring at my empty flagpole in disbelief. The rainbow colors that had proudly waved outside my home for years were gone, replaced by a stiff, blue and white homeowner association banner that seemed to mock me with its corporate blandness. I stood frozen on my front lawn, my grocery bag still clutched in my hands, trying to process what I was seeing. The spring breeze that had felt so pleasant just moments before now felt like a cold slap against my face as that unfamiliar banner fluttered where my pride flag should have been. A mixture of anger and violation washed over me as I realized someone had deliberately trespassed onto my property to make this statement. I had just returned from the farmer's market with fresh produce for the week, my mind preoccupied with dinner plans and work deadlines. That's when I noticed it, the jarring sight of the homeowner association's logo catching the afternoon sunlight where vibrant rainbow stripes should have been. I set my grocery bags down carefully on the lawn, approaching the flagpole with deliberate steps, as if getting closer might somehow reveal this was all a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Up close, I could see they had even taken care to properly secure the banner with the same clips that had held my pride flag. This wasn't impulsive vandalism, it was a calculated replacement. I pulled out my phone to take photos, documenting the unauthorized change from every angle. My hand trembled slightly as I texted my husband, "Chris, you won't believe what Debbie's done now." Before he could respond, a black SUV with government plates pulled up to my curb. Two individuals in professional attire approached, badges already out. The woman had short, cropped hair and a stern expression, while her partner, a tall man with broad shoulders, carried a tablet device. "Mr. Miller? Department of Homeland Security. I'm Agent Davis, and this is Agent Johnson. We received an alert from this location approximately 47 minutes ago. Do you have a moment to talk about your flagpole?" My stomach dropped as the full implications hit me. The security protocols had been triggered exactly as designed. Debbie had no idea what she had just done. "My name is Alex Miller, and before settling into this quiet suburban neighborhood in Willow Creek Estates, I spent 15 years in military intelligence, followed by a transition to civilian cybersecurity. My career path was not something I discussed casually with neighbors. Most knew I worked in computers and had served in the military, but few understood the sensitive nature of my work or the security clearances I still maintain. After years of deployments and temporary housing, my husband, Chris, and I had dreamed of putting down roots somewhere peaceful. Somewhere we could simply exist without constantly navigating the complexities of being a same-sex couple in environments that weren't always welcoming. We found our brick colonial in Willow Creek Estates 3 years ago during an unseasonably warm October weekend. The tree-lined streets with their well-established maples and oaks had just begun to turn brilliant shades of red and gold. The house itself needed minimal work, just some updating to the kitchen and primary bathroom, but it had good bones and character missing from newer developments. More importantly, when we toured the neighborhood, we noticed several indicators of an inclusive community: a "hate has no home here" sign in one yard, a family with 2 moms chatting with neighbors at a nearby playground. Diversity in the people we passed while walking the streets. We weren't looking to make any political statements, we just wanted to live peacefully and authentically. The pride flag was simply an expression of our identity, nothing more. Chris works as a pediatric physical therapist at the university hospital, helping children with mobility challenges. His gentle nature and infinite patience make him exceptional at his job, and he often comes home with drawings from his young patients or messages of gratitude from their parents. The contrast between our professional lives, his healing and nurturing, mine analyzing threats and vulnerabilities, has always provided a balance to our relationship. But we settled quickly into suburban life, joining the neighborhood running group, hosting occasional dinner parties, and establishing ourselves as reliable neighbors who would collect packages or water plants when others were away. The pride flag went up almost immediately, not as a statement, but simply as an indicator of our home. What most of our neighbors did not know, however, was that approximately 8 months ago, Our flagpole was registered under a special Homeland Security pilot program designed to protect symbols frequently targeted by hate crimes. The initiative had emerged following congressional hearings about the rise and targeted vandalism against religious and cultural symbols across the country. As a veteran with security clearance and connections still in the government, I had been among the first wave of applicants when the program opened to civilian participation. My application cited 3 separate incidents in neighboring communities where pride flags had been stolen, burned, or defaced. The approval process had been thorough: background checks, property assessments, installation of discrete monitoring equipment. The sensor itself was ingeniously designed to detect unusual movement patterns consistent with tampering while filtering out normal environmental factors like wind or rain. Everything had been fine in our community until 6 months ago when Debbie Peterson, known universally as the menace behind her back, was elected as the president of our homeowner association. The previous president, a retired teacher named Mr. Henderson, had run the association with a light touch, focusing primarily on community events and essential maintenance rather than strict enforcement of aesthetic guidelines. When he announced he wouldn't seek another term due to health concerns, most homeowners expected his vice president, Maria Rodriguez, to step into the role. But Debbie, who had moved to the neighborhood just 18 months earlier from an exclusive gated community across town, launched an aggressive campaign. Her carefully designed flyers appeared on every doorstep, promising to restore property values and elevate community standards. She hosted wine and cheese gatherings in her impeccably decorated home where she showed slideshows of concerning neighborhood trends and aesthetic inconsistencies that she claimed were diminishing our collective investment. The photos never included identifying information, but those of us who recognized our own homes or our neighbors' properties in her presentation felt an unmistakable chill. Debbie presented herself as a successful real estate agent who understood what discerning buyers looked for, positioning herself as the guardian of our financial interests. The election had a surprisingly high turnout. Debbie had mobilized many homeowners who had never before participated in association matters. She won by a mere 12 votes, immediately appointing 2 like-minded neighbors to committee positions and scheduling a standards review as her first official act. She had campaigned on a platform of restoring neighborhood standards and ensuring family-friendly aesthetics, terms that sounded reasonable enough until you understood the subtext. From day one, Debbie had made it clear that certain displays did not align with her vision for our community. She began with seemingly innocuous changes: stricter trash can placement rules, limitations on basketball hoops, regulations about holiday decorations being removed within 5 days of the holiday's end. But a pattern emerged in her enforcement. The rainbow welcome mat at the Miller's house prompted a citation for non-standard entryway decorations, while the Rodriguez family's Virgin of Guadalupe garden statue received a notice about unapproved lawn ornaments. Meanwhile, the enormous inflatable sports mascots that appeared every weekend during football season on the lawns of several other homes somehow never warranted official attention. While she never explicitly mentioned lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer pride symbols in her communications, her disapproving glances whenever she walked past our home told me everything I needed to know. I would often catch her slowing her pace, her eyes fixed on our flag, lips pursed in that distinctive expression of someone who has identified something offensive but is exercising great restraint in not commenting. Occasionally, she would be walking with another board member or a prospective buyer, and I could see her gesturing subtly toward our home while speaking in hushed tones. Once, I overheard her telling someone that certain politically charged displays can affect the perception of a neighborhood's family orientation. Still, despite this clear targeting, I never expected her to take matters into her own hands so directly. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. The trouble began 3 weeks ago when an official homeowner association citation appeared in our mailbox. I had just returned from my morning run when I noticed the crisp white envelope with the association logo prominently displayed in the corner. Inside was a formally worded notice on heavy cardstock, complete with the association letterhead and Debbie's flowing signature at the bottom. The notice claimed, "Our flag violated Section 7.3 of the Community Guidelines regarding non-standard decorative displays." According to the citation, all exterior decorative elements needed to conform to the neutral and harmonious aesthetic standards established for the benefit of all residents. There was even a helpful brochure enclosed showing acceptable flag displays, which consisted entirely of American flags, state flags, and sports team banners. The citation included a compliance deadline of 14 days and mentioned potential fines of $50 per day for continuing violations. What particularly struck me was the personal note Debbie had. "As we strive to make Willow Creek Estates the premier community in the county, we appreciate your prompt attention to this matter. Remember, the choices of individual homeowners impact everyone's property values." The implied threat was impossible to miss. Property values, that eternal bogeyman of suburban communities, were supposedly at risk because of our rainbow flag. Chris arrived home from his hospital shift that evening to find me at the dining room table surrounded by documents. I had emptied our filing cabinet of every piece of paper related to our home purchase, community bylaws, and the federal flagpole registration. "Another run-in with Debbie?" he asked wearily, setting down his bag and joining me at the table. I handed him the citation without comment, watching his expression change from exhaustion to indignation as he read. "This is getting ridiculous," he said finally. "She can't possibly think this will stand up to any kind of scrutiny." I immediately pulled out our property documents and the federal registration paperwork. As I suspected, the homeowner association had no authority to regulate flags on federally registered poles, a fact explicitly stated in both the program documentation and our property deed addendum. The registration created a specific exemption from local aesthetic controls for the purpose of preventing discriminatory enforcement. I spent that evening drafting a detailed response letter, citing relevant sections of both the homeowner association bylaws and the federal program guidelines, along with copies of all relevant documentation. The letter was professional but firm, making it clear that we were fully aware of our rights and the limits of association authority. The following day, rather than simply mailing my response, I decided to hand-deliver it to Debbie's home. Her property was at the entrance to our subdivision, a strategic location that allowed her to monitor all comings and goings. The house itself was a showcase, with professionally landscaped gardens, architectural uplighting, and seasonal wreaths that changed monthly. I rang the doorbells precisely at 6:30 in the evening, knowing from neighborhood gatherings that this was when she typically returned from her real estate office. Debbie answered wearing a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, her expression shifting from professional welcome to barely concealed annoyance when she recognized me. I maintained my composure despite her visible irritation, simply stating that I was delivering my formal response to the citation. She scanned the first page rapidly, her perfectly manicured nail tapping against the paper as she reached the section about federal exemptions. "This is a simple aesthetic matter, Alex. Nobody is targeting you specifically," she said with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "We just want consistency in our beautiful neighborhood. Surely you understand that personal statements, however meaningful to you, can be divisive in a community setting." I politely informed her that the flag would stay and that any attempt to remove it would potentially violate federal protections. I also pointed out that 3 other homes in the neighborhood displayed sports flags year-round without citation, suggesting that the selective enforcement raised concerns about discriminatory intent. At this, her professional veneer cracked slightly. "Those are completely different circumstances. Sports teams represent community spirit, not political statements." I chose not to argue the point, simply reiterating that the documentation was all in order and that we expected the citation to be withdrawn immediately. She closed the door without responding. The soft click was somehow more dismissive than a slam would have been. For a week, nothing happened. I thought perhaps Debbie had consulted with the homeowner association attorney and realized she was overstepping. Then last night, while Chris and I were at his company dinner, our doorbell camera activated. The footage showed Debbie approaching our flagpole with another board member, removing our pride flag, and installing the homeowner association banner in its place. Her voice was clear on the recording. "There, that looks much better. This is not about their lifestyle choices. It is about maintaining the standards we all agreed to when purchasing homes here. The rules apply to everyone equally." She then placed our folded flag in a plastic bag and left it on our porch with another citation attached. What Debbie did not know, what she could not have known unless she had thoroughly read the documentation I provided, was that our flagpole contained a discrete sensor as part of the Homeland Security program. This technology was designed to detect and report unauthorized tampering or removal as potential bias incidents. The moment she detached our flag, an automated alert was generated and transmitted to the regional Homeland Security office. This program had been implemented precisely because of people like Debbie, who use rule enforcement as a thin veneer for discrim. The system worked exactly as designed, which is why 2 federal agents were now standing on my doorstep asking to review my surveillance footage. I invited the agents inside and provided them with all the documentation, my application to the program, the approval, the sensor installation records, and of course, the doorbell footage from the previous night. Agent Johnson, the senior officer, watched the video with a neutral expression before asking, "Has there been a pattern of similar incidents in your community?" I showed them the citation letters and explained Debbie's history of selective enforcement. She has never once cited the Thompson family for their oversized sports team flag or the Millers for their seasonal banners that change monthly. The only difference is the content of our display. The agents exchanged glances. "We'll need to speak with Mrs. Peterson and the Homeowner Association Board. This appears to be a clear case of targeted removal, which under the program guidelines requires a full investigation." Within hours, the entire dynamic of our neighborhood had shifted. The agents visited Debbie's home, requesting homeowner association records, enforcement histories, and a formal interview regarding her actions. From my living room window, I could see her gesturing animatedly, her face flushed with indignation. Later that evening, my phone began buzzing with text messages from neighbors who had noticed the government vehicle making its rounds through our community. "Is everything okay? What is going on with the homeowner association?" I provided minimal details, simply stating that there had been a potential violation of federal regulations and authorities were looking into it. By nightfall, the neighborhood messaging group was alive with speculation, and Debbie's usual confident tone was noticeably absent. The next morning, Agent Johnson returned with Agent Davis. "We've completed our preliminary investigation and confirmed your registration status. What Mrs. Peterson did constitutes tampering with a federally protected installation. We've informed the Homeowner Association Board that removing your flag was not only outside their authority but potentially a federal offense under bias incident statutes." The agent handed me back my pride flag, which they had retrieved from Debbie. "We would like to be present when you reinstall this, if that is acceptable to you." I nodded, somewhat stunned by the seriousness with which they were treating the situation. As we walked to the flagpole, I noticed curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. For the first time since Debbie's election, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Debbie attempted damage control almost immediately. She called an emergency homeowner association meeting for that evening, sending notices that blamed miscommunication and overzealous enforcement for the incident. What she did not expect was for the federal agents to request attendance at this meeting. When I arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was tense. Debbie sat at the head table, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. When she saw me enter with the agents, her already pale face lost what little color remained. The meeting began with Debbie attempting to frame the incident as a simple misunderstanding about jurisdiction. "We were simply trying to maintain community standards," she explained to the packed room. "There was absolutely no discriminatory intent whatsoever. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." Agent Johnson then stepped forward, requesting permission to address the gathering. In measured tones, he explained the Homeland Security program and its purpose. The flagpole at the Miller residence is registered under federal protection due to the documented increase in bias incidents targeting such symbols. Tampering with or removing the flag triggers an automatic federal alert. He then played the doorbell camera footage on the projector screen for all to see. Debbie's words about their lifestyle choices echoed through the silent room. The agent continued, "Based on our investigation, this appears to be a targeted action against a protected display. The selective enforcement pattern suggests potential bias motivation, which elevates this from a simple rule violation to a federal matter under hate crime prevention statutes." The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly distancing themselves from Debbie's actions. Vice President Thompson cleared his throat. "Speaking for myself, I was not aware of the federal registration or the full circumstances." Mrs. Peterson indicated this was a routine enforcement matter that had board approval. Debbie's attempt to spread responsibility was crumbling before my eyes. When the agent mentioned that interfering with federally protected symbols carried potential penalties, including fines and, in serious cases, criminal charges, I noticed several board members physically leaning away from Debbie. The meeting reached its climax when I was invited to speak. I had prepared a statement, but standing there facing Chris and I moved here because we wanted to be part of a community where everyone could live with dignity and respect. The flag on our pole represents who we are, nothing more, nothing less. We followed every proper channel, secured every necessary permission. This was never about challenging rules or seeking special treatment. It was simply about existing openly in our own home. I paused, looking directly at Debbie. "When you removed our flag under cover of darkness, you were not enforcing rules. You were erasing us. And that is why these protections exist." A profound silence followed my words. Then board member Sarah Miller stood up. "I move that we immediately rescind all citations against the Miller property, issue a formal apology from the homeowner association, and suspend Mrs. Peterson from her duties pending a full review of her actions." The vote was nearly unanimous, with only Debbie herself voting against the motion. As a final measure, Agent Johnson requested that the homeowner association banner be removed from my property under their supervision and that I be permitted to reinstall my pride flag without further interference. The board readily agreed, clearly eager to resolve the situation and avoid further federal scrutiny. The next morning, a small procession made its way to our flagpole. The federal agents stood watching as Debbie, under the supervision of the remaining board members, removed the homeowner association banner with trembling hands. She avoided my gaze completely as Vice President Thompson formally apologized for the unauthorized removal of our flag. Then, with neighbors watching from porches and driveways, I raised our pride flag once more. As it caught the breeze and unfurled against the blue sky, a spontaneous round of applause broke out from several households. I noticed even some residents who had previously seemed indifferent were among those showing support. The federal agents nodded in satisfaction before departing, leaving behind their cards with instructions to contact them immediately if any further incidents occurred. The story broke nationally 2 days later. A local news outlet had gotten wind of the federal involvement, and suddenly our quiet neighborhood dispute was being featured on morning shows and news websites. The Homeland Security program received widespread attention, with officials confirming that similar protections were being implemented in communities across the country. My inbox filled with messages of solidarity from lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer advocacy groups and fellow veterans, many sharing their own experiences with discrimination hidden behind rule enforcement. Multiple neighborhood homeowner associations across the country began reviewing their policies regarding flag displays, with several publicly committing to non-discrimination protocols. Debbie's world collapsed around her with shocking speed. The federal investigation into her actions continued, with agents interviewing other community members about previous enforcement patterns. The evidence of selective rule application mounted daily. Major homeowner association management companies issued statements distancing themselves from her actions, and several professional certification bodies in the property management field began reviews. Her real estate business suffered immediate consequences as clients canceled listings, unwilling to be associated with someone under federal investigation for biased actions. When I last saw her, she was hurriedly loading boxes into her car, her phone pressed to her ear, voice tight with stress as she apparently consulted with her attorney. Her crusade to control our neighborhood's appearance had instead exposed her prejudice to the harsh light of national attention, turning her into an unwitting example of why such protections were necessary in the first place.